If evolution is so great, why on earth do we have a brain that is making so many mistakes?
Hey guys, I'm Eric Olson, and welcome back to the Science-Centric Podcast. In this episode, we're delving into the mysterious world of neuroscience, specifically as it relates to the human brain. Composed of over 100 billion neurons, by some estimates, our brains may be the most complex object that's ever existed. And that little 3-pound lump of gray tissue between our ears has dreamed up some pretty amazing things, from symphonies to skyscrapers to the very technology that is allowing me to communicate with you now, potentially half a world away. But as amazing as our brains can be, they don't always operate the way we'd like. We forget stuff, or we remember it incorrectly. We're easily bored or distracted. We're terrible at estimating the time it takes to complete tasks. The list goes on and on and on. And I'm sure some of us marvel at the precision and efficiency of computers, wishing our brains operated in much the same way. We remember everything perfectly. We'd never feel bored or get distracted. We'd have laser-like focus. We'd be on all the time. But not so fast, says our guest, neuroscientist Henning Beck. Henning is a writer, speaker, consultant, and author of the forthcoming book, Scatterbrain, How the Mind's Mistakes Make Humans Creative, Innovative, and Successful. He says what we perceive as our brain's flaws are actually the things that make us uniquely human, and in some ways more capable than computers. We spoke about how the human brain actually works, how tech companies are using our distractibility against us, and what we can do to use our brains in the most productive way possible. But before we dive in, head over to sciencecentric.com/support to help keep this podcast running. We accept direct donations via Patreon and also get a little kickback on any purchases made through the site at no added cost to you. Other ways you can show your support are liking and sharing this video, and of course, subscribing to our channel. All right, enough of that. Let's get on to the good stuff. Henning, welcome to the Science-Centric Podcast. We're so glad to have you from Frankfurt, Germany. That's awesome.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, we're across the Atlantic from each other at least, but it's so cool that we can talk to each other.
Cool.
Long distance. Yeah. So your book Scatterbrain: How the Mind's Mistakes Make Humans Creative, Innovative, and Successful. It's a really interesting book. I think it's really timely because a lot of people are worried about artificial intelligence and sort of computers taking over, and we're just not going to be able to compete with them because they're so good at crunching numbers and they're getting smarter all the time. But your book is sort of about how the human brain is not a computer, and how we, our brains do things better in a lot of cases. And so the things we think of as flaws, that computers do better are actually advantages that we have. Do you think that that's a good kind of summation of your book? And is that sort of maybe part of your impetus for writing it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is the main idea I had, because everybody's speaking about perfectionism, becoming faster, more efficient, more concentrated. Everybody's trying to do less mistakes, of course, because mistakes and errors are a bad thing, of course. But in fact, the brain is not designed to think perfectly and flawlessly all the time. And I wondered, if evolution is so great, why on earth do we have a brain that is making so many mistakes? Or is it just the other way around? Because we do a lot of mistakes, or maybe mistakes are just the flip side of what we call advantageous thinking in terms of creativity, in terms of planning, in terms of behaving adaptively. Because efficiency and perfectionism, as we try to seek it in artificial intelligence, I mean, this is good if everything stays the same, if the rules and the whole world around us is completely stable, then this is the method of choice. But we are human beings. We know that we have to adapt to new environments. And the brain, because it does some kind of mistakes or has some kind of mental slips and careless mistakes and such, we have to pay this price in order to be creative and more adaptive than computers and artificial intelligence.
So you're saying there's a trade-off between how computers function and how our brain functions.
I think it's totally different. I mean, there's no such thing like a flash drive in our mind, or we are running on programs or such. We don't have a difference between hardware and software. Artificial intelligence, as far as I see it, is more or less a way of pattern recognition. And of course, the brain does that all the time. I mean, when we learn language, it's a kind of pattern recognition. But we also change the rules instead of always following them. If my neighbor, he's like 4 years old. If I tell him that there are some rules for a game, he tries to break these rules. When I feed some rules into an artificial intelligence, some kind of super intelligence chess playing engine, it tries to follow the rules, but it will never invent a new rule, because no machine is trying to do, okay, I don't like this game, I want to do something else, right? And to do that, you have to break the patterns you recognized before. And you don't know whether this is going to work or not. You don't know whether an idea is going to fly or not. But trying it is way more important than doing it perfectly. And this is our niche. This is our cognitive edge we have in comparison to machines.
Interesting. So one thing that I thought was interesting also is thinking about how the brain works, and you made a comparison to how a symphony works, where there's a conductor and the conductor is sort of leading the musicians through the song, but the brain doesn't really work that way. There's no conductor. So how does it even work? Because how does it organize thoughts and ideas and function if like no single entity is really in charge? I mean, that sort of blows my mind.
Well, this is a very good question. And in fact, it's how much time do I have to answer this? Because this is a hard question. But interestingly, I think the example of an orchestra is pretty nice, because what you see, when you look at an orchestra from outside, you don't know what melodies this system is able to play or has recently played. As the same with the brain. When you cut a brain, when you open it and you look at the brain from outside, you have no idea what ideas this system is able to think. And just as a melody or the music is not located anywhere in an orchestra, a thought is not located anywhere in a tiny part in the brain. No matter how deeply you look into a brain, you will never find a thought, because a thought, or what we call thinking, this is what is happening when these neurons, these nerve cells, interact with each other, synchronize themselves, and this behavior, this activity state, this is what we could call a thought. Interestingly, we don't know how all this happens. We know all these tiny parts in the cellular machinery. We know the molecular biology of neurons pretty nicely. We also know how the whole thing is composed in general, but we don't know this in between. How is thought generated out of these cellular actions? And I think this is some kind of the holy grail of neuroscience, because when you decipher that, you will decipher the principle of thinking.
Yeah, and I mean, we have this internal sense, though, that we have this cohesive, consciousness and train of thought. And reading your book, I started to like question myself, because we have this,
because you're a human being. A computer would never do that. A computer is looking for correlations. Everything has to be stable. And human beings challenge their beliefs. They challenge themselves. And this is what we call progress, right? This is what we call like the sense of life, that we proceed and do something else. And breaking the habits, breaking the patterns, breaking the perspectives you have. This is the best thing you can do to use your brain for.
Yeah. I think though that it's I think what's interesting about we have a perception of reality that feels very cohesive, but then neuroscience is this and it's subjective. But then you have neuroscience which says that and these experiments, which you outline in the book, where it shows how flawed that sort of sense of reality is and cohesiveness. One of those areas is talking about memory. And you know, we think we remember everything that we experience, but we don't. We filter out a lot. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that and you know, how our you know, brain deals with memories, because I believe we get something like, I read somewhere that we get 11 trillion bits of information or something in any 1 second of sensory information, and then, you know, what happens to all of that?
Well, first, the purpose of our memory is not that we remember the past as precise and accurately as possible, because the past is gone, right? We cannot change the past. The purpose of our memory is that we can act in the here and now and plan the future. So this is the reason why we don't have perfect memory, because consider we had a perfect memory. We would remember everything, but then you have a problem. You would have to manage to prioritize, to say what is important, what is not important. And the more you remember, the harder it is to find the information for your planning in the present. So this is one reason why we forget stuff. It is not like something that is telling us that our brain is bad, but on the other hand, the brain is using active forgetting in order to make the most important information more precise and more pronounced. On the other hand, memory is not stored anywhere in your brain. We call that all the time. Even when we use language, we say that. We save something, we store something in order to recall it later, right, as if memory is located anywhere. But if I tell you, think of your grandma right now, then it is not that you have a specific grandma part in your brain where your granny is stored, but it's more like your brains get a certain kind of activity pattern, and this pattern, this dynamics is what we call the memory of your grandma. Just like an orchestra creates a song, a melody every time in the present. It is not retrieving or recalling a song from some kind of device, but it's more like that you create the song in the here and now. And this is how we create memory, because we have to make decisions in the present. And on the other hand, our memory is never, we forget stuff, yeah, and it is even more, it is not precise and accurate. We invent stuff retrospectively. It is easy to fool people to believe stuff that never happened, because the memory is always constantly updated. Whenever you recall a memory, or whenever you recreate a memory on your mind, it is in a state of that you can update it with new information. And by doing this, you are very adaptively, you are very flexible in your thinking, you are good at planning, you are good at asking what-if questions. But on the other hand, the same regions that make you asking these hypotheses and what-if questions are the same regions that falsify your memories, or that distort your memories. So it's hard for you to verify or to falsify what happened.
So it's almost like if you were pulling up a computer file, say a photo of something, and like every time you pull it up, it looks a little bit different.
Yeah, of course. And this is a bad thing at first sight, because you cannot ever 100% rely on your memories, never. But on the other hand, the memories are very flexible. They are like the material you need in order to make good decisions in the here and now. Mm-hmm. And it is way more important to have good plans about the future than a good memory about the past. Yeah. And this is why our memory is not like that we store our past in a specific place in our brain, but it's way more dynamic and way more flexible. But
I mean, that also says that we shouldn't trust our memories, right? I mean, yeah.
I mean, this is an issue when you go to court, when you ask eyewitnesses, or if you ask people that study history and asking people what happened during the war, what happened 50 years ago. It is never 100% correct.
Yeah.
So this is an issue, and we should keep this in mind when we rely on what people say.
Yeah. And is there anything that we can do to improve our memory?
Well, the bad thing is not really.
Sorry, make our what I mean is make our memories more accurate, I guess would be another way of saying that.
Well, first, very often I hear people asking, how do I make myself forgetting less stuff? How do I get a better memory?
Yeah.
I think it is not important saving information. Like if you read a newspaper article, it is not important that you remember all the words and all the sentences. Yeah. It is that you remember the main message, and it is that you understand what was written there. And to do this, you should detach from the idea that a perfect memory is the ultimate goal.
Right.
Sometimes you should forget. Sometimes you should have phases during the day where you're not concentrating on what happened or what is happening, but just drifting away on your mind in order to digest the information you had and make knowledge out of this information.
Yeah. So understanding is more important than memorizing.
Understanding is more important than everything else.
Yeah.
More important than learning, more important than memorizing, just recalling, because understanding is something truly human.
Right.
I doubt that there is another animal or another system, including artificial intelligence, that really understands what is happening. That is understanding causation and not only correlation. That is making plans actively. And this is our unique human power.
Yeah. Okay, great. So forgetting things is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a feature, not a bug, as they say.
Well, it depends. When you forget that you forgot something, then it's a bad thing. As long as you remember that you're forgetting stuff, then you're on the good side.
All right. So another really fascinating thing, or another really fascinating chapter in your book is about time. A lot of people have challenges with estimating how long things are going to take. I've noticed as I've gotten older that time seems to go faster, and we all remember summertime as kids, and summer seemed to last 3 years, not 3 months. And so what's going on there? And, why are we so bad at judging time and how long things are going to take, or how much time we have?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. And the thing is that we don't perceive time like other sensory input. We don't feel what an hour is. Like we feel the sun on our skin, or we don't feel a second, something like that. Because we create the time always retrospectively. And because the brain is not counting seconds and hours, because seconds and hours, they don't exist in nature. I mean, hours don't grow in trees, right? Hours are a human invention.
Right.
And so the brain does something different. It just takes experiences and events from our past, and it has some kind of internal timeline, and organizes all of the past events and what happened on this timeline. And the more stuff happened, you think retrospectively, oh, this was a very long time, because there were so many new things and so much I experienced, and retrospectively it seems like forever. This is the reason why young human beings, boys and girls, think that the summer lasts forever, because a lot of new stuff is happening. You get older, you have seen more stuff, there's something that happens every year, so it's not new anymore. And the brain says, oh, nothing new, so I can forget it. Why should I remember it? And there are less events on this internal timeline, so retrospectively it seems like the time is flying or going faster, but it's more like that you don't have new events on the same time scale in your brain. And thereby it speeds up over time. So the best way to have a very long life is that you have a lot of new stuff around you, that you travel a lot, meeting new people, because retrospectively you can dupe yourself, right? Retrospectively, it looks like a lot of stuff happened. And it seems like you had a very long life.
And you say in the book that things that we're doing that are very routine, that we're doing again and again, sort of get compressed into one event.
Yeah.
So doing those new things kind of like fills out that timeline with stuff. Whereas if you're doing things that are routine, they all just kind of get lumped into one activity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the other way around. A lot of big projects fail in budget and time. And the reason for this is that you ask a lot of experts. But when you're an expert in your field, you had a lot of projects of building like train stations or whatever. And retrospectively, the brain shortens all these past projects, and you're worse at estimating the duration of a future project. So a very good advice in order to calculate or estimate the duration of a project is that you ask non-experts, because usually non-experts are way more precise at estimating the correct duration.
That's fascinating. I mean, I don't know how that's possible.
Here's to you, all the consultants in the world.
So just ask a family member who doesn't know what doesn't know your field, and maybe they'll.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time. This is, by the way, this is a very good advice in general. That you ask people who are not an expert in the field, because they are asking naive questions that you're not asking anymore because you're process blinded, right. And so focused in the zone. And usually you're not looking outside the box anymore because you're not forced to do that. And it is way more important that you ask a lot of naive questions, because I think this is part of science, right? Science is not only about giving good answers, but about asking good questions. Yeah. Because questions push us forward, and questions give us new perspectives. Just as Abraham Lincoln said, I don't like this man. I have to get to know him better, because getting other people into your perspective really spices up your way of thinking.
Right. And I guess it's, that to bring it back to that idea of a timeline, it's sort of forcing you to unpack that timeline and because you've done this thing so many times that you just sort of skip over, oh yeah, we did this before, we did this task before. That didn't take that long, but you don't really remember how hard it was, and all the struggles and
this is why you're always late at buying Christmas presents, right? Because you think you have done that so many times, you think, oh, it's going to happen, and suddenly time's running out. So the best way to do that is really, if you have projects that are constantly running out of time, like buying Christmas presents, you can write it down how long it takes, because as I said, retrospectively, people systematically underestimate the duration of routine projects. Yeah. And on the other hand, really try to break the routines. Because first, you're way better at estimating future durations of projects if you add some new kind of, like a new twist in your project or a new way to do that. It is not very efficient, because it's speaking. It is speaking not in favor of doing everything in a compressed and efficient way, but usually you're really improving your way of thinking. You're improving your estimation of duration, and you're improving your perspectives in terms of doing something in a new way, and also solving problems in a new way. Mm-hmm.
So maybe you need to slow down a little bit and ask more questions and
ask other people
to bring them in. Great. I have a lot of trouble with this one, so I
me too.
Yeah.
Because we are human beings.
Yes. Well, and also I do a lot of video production work, and there's a lot of steps in there, and I think what happens is that I just tend to gloss over. I don't sort of write down all the steps involved, because if I did, that would be overwhelming. So I just sort of compress it, and then I'm like, oh, well, that actually does take a lot of time. So
exactly.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about another chapter in the book, which is distraction. I think that's a very timely, another timely topic. So people are so distracted now with their smartphones and everything, and we're inundated with so much media and so many different kinds of media, and it's all on demand. What's happening there? I mean, why is it so hard to focus, and what can we do to become less distractible?
Well, first, distraction is the result that our strongest drive we had is curiosity. I mean, everything else you can slow it down, tear it down completely, or ignore it for a time, but not that we are constantly seeking new information. Mm-hmm. And technical devices like smartphones or stuff was designed in order to capture people's attention, because we are falling into that curiosity trap that we are trying to seek for something new, and as soon as it like vibrates or rings, we are reaching out for it. And this is just the result that we are always trying to think outside the box. Consider the alternative. If human beings would always be focused, always in the zone, it would be good, as I said, if everything stays the same and you have a task that you have to complete as fast and efficient as possible. But usually human brains are looking around as, what can I do else? And what do I have? What other possibilities do I have? And this distraction mode that is sometimes important to get to a new perspective, it's just backfiring when we are trying to concentrate and stay in the zone. Yeah. And as you said, nowadays it is so easy to be distracted because all this media, all these devices, phones and push notifications and calls and messages and all that. This is constantly hijacking our way of positive distraction and basically turning it into a bad thing, because then you're not getting things done because you're not able to focus anymore.
Is there a part of the brain that actually causes us or is behind this, like seeking novelty or seeking new information?
Well, it's more like usually we have some filters in our brain, the thalamus, for instance, that is filtering out most of the sensory input. But the brain top down can control the leakiness of this kind of filter. So when you say, okay, I want to focus on my shoes or the glasses I'm wearing or the ring on my finger, it is easy that you can let all these sensory information pass this thalamus. Uh-huh. And interestingly, whether we are distracted or not does not depend on the distractor, because right now I have some roadwork right around the corner here. But if I'm really focused and on a thing that is really getting my attention, and I'm really typing something or really like watching a video or else, I'm not recognizing that there's a lot of roadwork outside, because the filter mechanisms are so sharp and so active that the distractor doesn't have a chance. So the thing is, if the environment changes, that is the trigger for our cognitive system to shift attention to this change. So we're not interested in the information itself, but in the change of information. And this is basically the reason why we are so curious about new stuff. Yeah.
So if I'm working in like an open office environment, which I have in the past, and I hate it, the best thing I could do is sort of focus in on a really high, mental challenging task, and that will make everything go away around me, right? Is that kind of the idea here?
Well, one thing is that the job or the project is too easy, because then you're easily distracted. Yeah. But on the other hand, just have an open office. This is not a good office or not a good workspace design. Yeah. Because we know that you have, like in my apartment here, I have a bathroom, I have a sleeping room, I have a kitchen. For everything I want to do, I have a different room. Same with the brain. No brain is able to work in an open office environment all the time. Sometimes it's good that you can chat with your colleagues or have a project like team members gathering very fast. But when you're concentrating on focusing on stuff, it is also important that you can basically that you're in an environment that is not distractive, that you are in a quiet place, less of noise around you, that you are able to focus on the stuff more precisely. Because if the things are too easy, you're distracted because you're not in need of focusing. And if it's too complicated, you're also distracted because you're saying, okay, why shall I pay attention? It's too complicated. But if you're in the mid-range, you're not getting out of the zone.
Interesting. Okay.
This is the reason why people bump against traffic signs watching on their smartphones, right? They are watching a YouTube video on their phone. They're not recognizing what is going on around them because they are so caught in this moment that they cannot be distracted. And so here, another example of that, it's not the distractor itself, but our mental mode. It is that we can top-down control what is distracting us and not.
Right. How about doing things like switching between tasks? So say you are doing tasks that are rather monotonous. Could you switch between tasks to kind of get away from that distraction as well?
Well, it depends. I mean, every time you switch, you have to pay a price because you're not in this tension mode when you switch from one task to the next one. So you're making more mistakes, and it takes a short time that you adjust yourself to the new task.
Yeah.
This is the reason why multitasking isn't working.
Right.
Just the same reason why you cannot watch two programs on YouTube or Netflix series or on TV, because you can watch one TV show, and when you flip to another one, you're not watching the first one. The screen is blank for a short period of time. And when you're watching the new show, you don't know what happened in the new show the last 5 minutes. So you have to watch it for a couple of minutes to understand what is going on there. Same is happening when you're switching between tasks. There's a short period that your mind is some kind of blank, that you have to adjust to the new task, and you're making more mistakes because this is not what we are good at. Switching is not an option.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned in the book also that, maintaining your attention for a long period of time is really hard because your short-term memory sort of fills up. Am I thinking of that the right way? And then it's like, there's really not room for more information. So your brain just kind of drifts off into thinking about something else, or is that?
This is another possibility why we are drifting away, that we are like cognitively overloaded. Mm-hmm. And we are not able to digest a super lot of information because there's a limit of what we can focus at. And if this limit is reached, it's like an overflow. It's like you're getting so many emails and you're not able to answer them all the time, and there's just an overflow. So you just send them to the trash can right away because you're not able to sort and to organize all that stuff. And this is another reason that your working memory, that part of your cognition that is when you're awake, concentrating and paying attention to the stuff around you, this has a limit. And if this limit is reached, you have to do a break, because otherwise all the new information coming in will be filtered out, or will be deleted, or won't be incorporated into the thoughts you had before. And this is a bad thing, actually.
Yeah. So it sounds like if you want to be as productive as you can, you need to be in a quiet place. You need to have a task that is sort of the right level of engagement, and then also like taking breaks every now and again just to.
I call for this balance between focusing on stuff and loading information, if you want, into your mind, and then that you have breaks in order to digest this. Because if you don't have these breaks, you won't turn information into knowledge. Right. Same with normal digestion. When I eat my muesli every morning, I hope that a lot of these muesli molecules will turn into muscle molecules. But I have to wait for this. I have to digest. When I eat muesli all the time, I'm exploding. Same with information. When I consume information all the time, I'm going to explode mentally, which we call that we forget stuff, that we feel distracted, that we are not focusing anymore, that we feel that time is flying, that we are not capable of keeping up with stuff. So I take breaks and I take some time to rest. So when I sit at a train, for instance, I'm not watching anything on my phone. Yeah. I'm not using my phone because I feel like a fossil from the 90s. I'm not having my smartphone. Everybody is saying, "Oh, poor guy." But I know that I digest the information I just read on a paper or just watched on a video, that I digest this information. And my brain is able to create something new out of that, but only if you do breaks. If you look at the biographies of all the creative geniuses in the world, they always have this balance between focusing, action, working hard, and then mental breaks in order to digest what they do. Computers don't do that.
Right.
No wonder that they are not creative. They are working all the time. If you're not taking any breaks, hard to reflect your thoughts.
Right. That makes sense. And, I guess in this day and age with so much media, it's like, people are just consuming all the time, and they're not ever taking those breaks to digest. But that's what the tech companies want. So they want you consuming all the time.
I know a lot of guys working in the tech company that are really not falling into that trap, that say, I don't use a smartphone at home. Not for my kids. I don't use it because they know the danger of these devices. I don't say that new media is bad in general.
Right.
But I think that we have to understand how to use it. I mean, smartphones 15 years ago, we didn't have smartphones, right? And so it's a very new invention, and people have to adapt to this and have to learn how to use this kind of media. And I'm pretty sure in 20 years, people will have found out that that being constantly available and constantly consuming stuff is not the best way to use your brain.
Yeah. Great. Well, I mean, at least, if you want to be creative and understand things and sort of not be a automaton,
Sure.
I think this is another subject that's relevant to the workplace, which is boredom. Doing monotonous tasks, doing things that you've done a million times before. How do we combat that? How do we make our lives more interesting, our workplaces more interesting? And why is it not bad to be bored? I mean, we just talked about how you need time to sort of digest things, but what's going on when we're bored?
Has a very bad image, right? I have never seen a talk or a book entitled by How to Become Super Boring or 10 Steps to Be Bored. Nobody does that, right? But in fact, I mean, boredom for a reason has a very bad image, because boredom means that you're sitting there forced to do nothing. And you're not able to express yourself, not able to do something actively, but just sitting there passively waiting for no obvious reason. And this is really contradicting our mental configuration, that we are always seeking for something new, that we are always curious. So this is why it hurts so much. Nobody is sitting at a bus station doing nothing. We are always doing something. We are reading something. We are watching something. We are talking to people, because just sitting there really annoys us.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what is interesting, when you ask people, where do you get good ideas? What are you doing when you are in a creative mode, when you solve problems? A lot of people recall events when they were on their own and not really working hard on a problem, but being some kind of bored or in a lazy mode. And this is like the flip side of this boredom is that we are daydreaming, that we're just sitting there, not passively being bored, but letting our mind go and just rethinking stuff we had before. And this is from outside, this can be very boring. To people sitting there and painting stuff can be very boring, right? But if you decide to do this on your own in order to step back from the usual work stuff you have to do, this mental power comes into action. And it's not about being bored, but it's we call that being imaginative. And this is a very similar mode in the brain. Very similar brain areas active at this very moment. On the one hand, can be very boring, but on the other hand, when you decide to do nothing work-related, the real creative power comes out of this.
Yeah, I think also that people tend to, when you're not doing anything and you're just sort of are doing something that's repetitive, your brain tends to go to your problems and the things that you would maybe rather not think about. So, I think that maybe is part of the pain of boredom. It would be great if we could just go like, I'm just going to let myself go and sort of work on, come up with write a song in my head, or I'm going to, but it seems like a lot of times people just kind of fall into, to a mental rut of thinking about those things and ruminating on the things that are not good in their lives. So is there a way to sort of get out of that mode and get into something that's perhaps more creative?
Well, I think rumination is also the flip side of thinking creatively. Mm-hmm. Because when you have a problem, like a problem in your private life or at work, and then I'm going on my bike. I do road biking all the time. And if I have a problem and go on my bike and do this routine, automated, monotonous stuff, riding my bike for 3 hours here around Frankfurt, it is really annoying because my thoughts are always going around this problem I had, always ruminating what happened over and over and over again. Yeah. And this is not productive. So if I have a problem that is really annoying me, I try to do something that is really getting out of my comfort zone. I try to talk to people. I try to do stuff I have never done before, in order to spice it up, to really to do really something very provocative. On the other hand, I know if I have a problem and I don't know the solution, so I try to write something about an article or whatever, and I don't know how to get to the point. I jump on my bike, and I know the same brain areas that are also responsible for rumination are now responsible for finding a solution for this problem. And there are very similar cognitive techniques or tactics that are applied by the brain. And in this case, it turns out that I find good solutions and good thoughts when I return from my bike ride, and I get to my desktop and I write it down. And it's the same principle in the brain, but the only difference is the basis. On the one hand, it was a bad basis, that you basically had a problem that was annoying you. On the other hand, you had a problem that you could solve and could do something productive out of that. And but the basic principle in the brain is the same. So
it sounds like you kind of want to selectively use that based on
yes.
on if like the thing you're ruminating about is productive or not. So
yes.
if you're thinking about some work situation that you can't change, maybe try to distract yourself and not do something monotonous where you're going to be thinking about things you can't control or take action on. Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, it depends on the task and the project you are in. But usually, I call for that you change or mix up the way of working you do. I mean, talking to others, having phases where you're where you are concentrated, and then having phases working together with others and mixing it up. This is usually the best way, because the more monotony you have in your work life or in your business life, the less creative you will become, and the more monotonous the idea will be at the end.
Right. So yeah, it sounds like we're just creatures that are designed for some sort of novelty in our lives. And that's, and shaking things up and not being in routines like, robots, basically. I mean, we need that.
Well, I think so, because, if you look at people, and this is the reason why the business models of the most valuable companies in our world are working. I mean, Google, Amazon, Facebook, all these companies are doing a whole lot of money because we are thinking in patterns and routines. If we would always seek for novelty and always try to do something else, they would not do any money, because then you cannot do any correlation. You cannot use all these algorithms and find similarities and stuff and such. So I think a lot of our lives are dedicated to finding patterns, routines, and like automated ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not thinking how to ride a bike. This is automized. This is my cerebellum working, and all these processes are on autopilot. And a lot of things we do when you brush your teeth, for instance, you can, the next time you brush your teeth, try to watch yourself. It is every day it's the same. I bet you brush your teeth always the same. You use the same ways to get to work. And this is how human beings also work, because we try to find routines. And maybe 98% of our lives are correlated. And a lot of companies do money with this. Yeah. But the residual 2% change everything, because this is the area where good ideas come from, where we change the rules instead of following them. And so we have to seek for novelty, but most of our times we're just in a correlation mode, because this is what the brain does. I mean, this is learning. Learning means finding correlations, finding patterns in the sensory input, so you can work with these sensory inputs better the next time. This is learning. But we are also able to do something more.
Right. Great. Well, that's probably a good place to stop. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thanks a lot.
I think we could talk for another couple of hours. We only covered maybe like 4 chapters. Talked about 4 chapters in the book. There's a lot more in there. The book is called Scatterbrain: How the Mind's Mistakes Make Humans Creative, Innovative, and Successful. Really interesting. I mean, it's just fascinating to find out how our brains work, and
thanks a lot.
Great tips on how to be more productive and work with our brains instead of against them. So thanks so much for coming on, Henning, and it's been a great conversation.
Likewise.
That's it for this show. If you learned something, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons. Also, click that little bell to get notifications when we've uploaded new videos. Also, I'd love to hear from you, so please leave any comments or questions below. If you have a question for one of our guests, I'll do my best to follow up with them directly and post a response. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.